Hey guys, today we are talking about a really cool bonus for our weekly episode, The Thing. We got Escape from New York, amazing Carpenter film from 1981. Highly, I think, underrated. I don't think a lot of people have seen this these days.
No, especially young people, which is a damn shame.
And it's a very special episode because we have our first guest. We have my uncle, screenwriter Sean Bridges.
Hey, how you doing?
He's a big Carpenter fan. He's here to chat with us today about one of his favorite movies. And without further ado, I'm Connor Eyzaguirre.
I'm Austin Johnson.
And you are listening to Filmgazm. We are very excited to do this episode. This is one of our favorite movies around this table. We all love this movie.
Yeah.
I've seen it too many times. I can't even. I've lost track. So
That's great.
Yeah.
I think I've owned it on tape, DVD, Blu-ray, bonus DVD. I need to get it in 4K now. So every time they put out a different version, I end up getting it. It's one of those lost, desert island classics.
Yes.
It's always in the group. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's my favorite one, but then that could be debatable for Carpenter. Definitely put him in levels, but it's up there, and it's an absolute classic.
Yes. It's one of those films that is always on the top 5 lists. It switches positions from time to time. Sometimes it's The Thing, sometimes it's Halloween, but it's always there.
That's the thing about Carpenter, though, is you can, like he said, there's levels to him. You can kind of be a fan of him and not necessarily you don't have to have a stake in one film. It can be, I'm a Halloween guy or I'm an Escape guy, And
Yeah.
For me, I'm a Sultan Precinct guy. So it's just different for everybody. It's awesome. That's the power of his directing, though.
Well, it's true. It's dated, but it still holds up. I mean, it takes place in '97, which already is came out in '80.
81.
So, and I don't know. I mean, I can't recall like the theater how it did at the box office or anything, but it was one of those that I think probably found its audience like a lot of Carpenter films on tape.
Did you see it in theaters?
No. I mean, I've seen it in the Alamo and revivals and stuff like that. Yeah. But first run. We were in Germany. I was in, but I don't remember seeing it in the theater. But I don't think it. I think it did okay. The reviews, like the reviews that came out, Time magazine, that kind of thing. Yeah, it was okay. And then a lot of his films kind of have that. When they're released, they're kind of dismissed or they don't have an impact, but they never fade. And I think Escape from New York probably was one of those that probably found its audience big time on cable and VHS tape, and then it's just never gone away. It's one of those that's constantly been brought up for remakes. We can talk about that, go down that rabbit hole, but it's
Rabbit holes.
I just I don't know if they'll ever. I hope they've never done it. I know Troublemaker Studios is kind of looking at it now. I think the writer of Luther took a stab at the last screenplay, but even what I heard is it's drastically different from the original. So it's one of those that I hope they don't touch.
Yeah. Especially since every time they've tried with Carpenter, they've just fucked it up repeatedly.
Well, and he even said his when it comes to just Carpenters and remakes, he shakes their hand, he takes the check, and he wishes them well, and that's kind of his connection to them. But I mean, I look at like Assault on Precinct 13, he did right out of college. He was still in his 20s when he did that.
Yeah.
And the remake on that was made in Canada for a 10-time more budget, and it flopped. I mean, it's not any. It just didn't have any staying power, where the original is one that I'll still go back to.
Oh, yeah.
Halloween, I mean, how many times they've tried. The Rob Zombie ones, I know there's some bad blood there, but I think it's its own movie, the two Rob Zombie kind of sequels, but it's still, I go back to the original every season.
Yeah.
Even the reboot that came out last year, I think that was successful because they tried to reboot the formula.
Yes. Yeah.
Of kind of doing it with a small group of people in 20-something days, and but I still go back to the original. So I think Carpenter, in a lot of ways, it's just his style. They can't really touch it. And Escape from New York is just one of those that it's still just as riveting. I think the thing that gets me, I remember printing out the script and realizing how threadbare it is. There's no fat on that script at all. And the lines are actually, if you really look at the dialogue, it's 2 or 3 words, that's it. There's nobody really doing any monologues or anything in that script. It moves like lightning. It's a very simple premise. There's all kinds of little Easter eggs we can talk about, like that's Jamie Lee Curtis's voice at the very beginning talking about the the Manhattan Island and where the wall goes around, and that I think it's uncredited. She's not in there. It's just one of those that I always thought it was Deborah Hill, but it's Jamie Lee Curtis.
I did not know that. That's awesome.
Frank Doubleday, who was the actor in Assault on Precinct 13, he was really the first Terminator before the Terminator. The way he played that role mute. I don't think he has a line in Assault on Precinct 13. He plays Romero in Escape from New York, which is a nod to George Romero, which is cool. The Doctor's a nod to David Cronenberg, so I love that he was giving nods to his peers. But there's all kinds of things we can talk about. I mean, Kurt Russell, when he read it, wasn't sure where to go with this.
Yeah, he told me that. Yeah,
I love that he had thought, well, how am I going to play this guy? And then when they cast Lee Van Cleef, he was like, I'll just Clint Eastwood this.
Yeah.
When you see the scene with them, their first meeting, I mean, you could take that scene and put it in a Leone Western, and it would kind of work. Just the badass kind of conversation between the two guys across the table.
Just the banter, yeah.
And he's even squinting when if you watch the scene, he's totally Clint Eastwooding it, sitting there at the table, lighting the cigar. I even think it's a Clint Eastwood cigar that he lights, kind of like one of those kind of old. Yeah, I think that's what he smokes in that scene, but it's just, it's awesome. Lee Van Cleef's wife said the most difficult scene for him was the helicopter. When the helicopter lands, when they go to New York, there's a scene where he walks. It's a long camera track, and he leaves from the helicopter and walks. And I guess because he had so many incidences as a Western actor falling off horses and just issues with, that was the most difficult thing for him to do. And you can see him kind of limping. Just that was in the scene, walking across into New York. Frank Doubleday, again, is our intro to the prisoners, and he sets the tone. Immediately, you get everything you can from that brief, if you're not in the air in 30 seconds, he dies, and countdown, and just his whole look, attitude, demeanor totally sets up that this is going to be a wild world.
There's no time, the audience, us, there's no time for us to really think about what's going on. Just kind of accept it, which is how I prefer. That's how I prefer a film to start. So,
well, and just even sci-fi, they lay out the rules. Jamie Lee Curtis lays them out real quick. This is the deal. It's a prison. This is where it's at. Nobody gets. Once you go in, you don't come out. Boom, story starts. Mm-hmm. I liked it that they're. If you get the sound, it's the only soundtrack that I have of his complete, that I love every kind of cut on it. I'll get bits of John Carpenter's scores, but the Escape from New York soundtrack,
it's
bar none.
Unbelievable.
Weird Robert Rodriguez connections. There's a poster for Escape from New York, one sheet in the kitchen at Troublemaker Studios. Just a weird little thing. When they were shooting Grindhouse, in between cuts, he would play the soundtrack for Escape from New York to kind of keep the vibe going.
Hell yeah.
That's what he kind of wanted. So I think it's one of his favorite movies. He's a giant fan. It's trying to think of more like kind of little obscure things about that movie that's just. Donald Pleasance, the idea that he plays the president is wild. And he even said, well, why me? He's like, why would I be the president?
I still say that.
And Carpenter said, well, look at it as like, he's like, if Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher had a kid. And he bought it, and he said, okay, that's how we'll do it. And I love that. I was going for the, on the score, there's a bank robbery cut, and there was a scene that initially started off the movie that they shot, but it never. I mean, I've seen kind of deleted scenes, and it's Snake, and I think Frisco Bob is the character that they're robbing the Federal Depository, and you see them kind of come in janitor outfits, and they take off, and it's basically a bank heist, and they rob it, and they go down to the subway. I think it's a subway that connects East Coast to West Coast. It was probably the LA abandoned subway where they shot it, and then they get Snake. The police force, they kill Bob, get Snake, and then the movie kind of starts. And that to me is where the line where he's talking to Brain and he's like, you know what they did to Bob? Because I never knew what the hell that meant. And it's like, that's what that means. Bob gets shot at the beginning, that they killed Bob.
Damn it, Bob.
Little things like that just, the idea that it was filmed in, they did 2 days in New York on Liberty Island, Statue of Liberty.
Yeah, I read that, yeah.
You can see the seam, how he cut it, and then Sepulveda Boulevard, and I'm not sure where they filmed the actual outside the Liberty Island police station. I guess it was all filmed primarily inside the prison. Was in St. Louis. There's a burned out section of St. Louis that they had the city turn off all the electricity and power. then Dean Cundey was able to light it with fires, and I love the things like that are amazing.
Incredible.
Let's see there were no computers, so the computer graphics were all New World. They went to New World, which was James Cameron who did the computer graphics for that. So the idea that when you see the glider, the computer graphics that you would think now would just, oh, that's a computer, but then they didn't even have computers, so nothing that was readily available to home viewers or anything. So he created that as a matte painting. I think matte paintings, and I think he created a city. I'm not like exactly how they did the effect, but it was homemade, and that throws back to his Roger Corman roots, I think, at New World. But it still holds up that kind of the glider flying in scene where they, that's how you're seeing Manhattan, the digitized buildings. Scene at the beginning where the plane crashes. I remember watching it again. The idea that it was a woman terrorist. I love that. That wouldn't have been common in the '80s, but they threw that in.
Still not common now.
One of the guys on board the plane was President Gerald Ford's son or nephew, which blows me away. He's in the credits, and he wanted to be in the movie, so they're like, yeah, come on, and they put him in as a Secret Service agent. I think he's a Secret Service agent that's hitting the door with the machine gun. Huh. And then it's like, we can't get in, they pressurize the door. I think that's Gerald Ford's nephew or son, but somehow he's connected to Gerald Ford, which is wild. The terrorist woman, that just the fact that they cast a woman in that role was something you probably didn't see in the late '70s, early '80s. So that stood out as just kind of a unexpected twist. The plane crash, they couldn't afford to literally crash a plane, so they created again a computer image of it. They bought a old plane, cut it up into thirds, and then stuck it in St. Louis, and then they filmed around it, lit it and filmed around it, so it was one giant set. Wow. And that's where Snake Plissken kind of gets to the point where he has to sit down. He doesn't know what to do, and he grabs a chair and just sits in the middle of the rubble. It's like, lights a cigarette, like, what the hell am I going to do? And then that's when the crazies come out or something? Yeah. And so it's one of those that I can kind of almost recite. It's scary how... little nods that I like. Everybody's stellar in it. Charles Cypress is in it, who was in Assault for Precinct 13.
Isaac Hayes.
Halloween. Isaac Hayes kills in that role.
That's my favorite character, man. I fucking love that character.
Well, and he was what? He was Truck Turner. I mean, he had done in some cinema. He was, Shaft. Theme song, of course. But there's a little twitch that he does whenever he's talking that I don't know if they said do that or if he just decided to do that for the character, but it just makes him completely badass.
He's a little unhinged. There's times where I think he's going to say something, and I think that's what you're saying with the fat. There's no fat. Instead, he just punches him in the face.
Yeah,
he knows he's a badass. He doesn't have to.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah,
that's great. Hell, you can talk about Ox Baker, who was a wrestler who hadn't been in movies, so didn't understand stunt work. So he was really hitting Kurt Russell full bore.
Yeah,
and you can see
Kurt
Russell's really holding on.
You can tell.
Hey, man, this is supposed to be fake. And then I guess he did not want to have him hit him in the head with the spike at the end. When the tables turn, when Kurt Russell is going to kill him, he was really nervous that, this was going to be payback for beating the shit out of him for the last, whenever they were filming that.
What a scene! Have you ever seen anything like that? I haven't. A baseball bat, basically a duel inside of a ring.
Yeah, it's gladiators.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Well, even the idea that the prisoners put on their own Broadway show.
Yeah,
I love that.
Fuck yeah, it's awesome.
And that was written by Nick Castle, who's the Shape.
Oh, yeah.
So
Nick
he
Castle's,
did that. They go back a long ways, and I think Nick Castle I think Carpenter said that he basically wrote that whole New York kind of kazoo song that they do. God, it's just so much. There's so much to it. That's just Harry Dean Stanton, who is not a guy who, if you listen to his random roles on the AV Club, where they interviewed him about 100 movies, and his responses are, I liked it, no, I liked it. But he actually liked John Carpenter. He's like, he was a cool guy. Because Harry Dean Stanton was not, he hated sci-fi, he hated horror. Mm-hmm. That's what he said to Ridley Scott for Alien. So I was like, why is he in this? But I think he just liked working with John Carpenter. He worked with him again in Christine. It's a killer role. I think Brain is just, he really just milks it as this kind of a, everybody has their moments, That's what I go back to. I think Tom Atkins, who's a actor out of Pittsburgh. Absolute badass. I mean, and went on to play the lead in Halloween 3. Lead in The Fog. Yeah. But I guess The Fog came first before Escape. But just his description about the crazies and some have street lights, how they get gas. Everybody just has their moment to shine, and I love that. Where a Carpenter script, you've got lead actors and secondary actors, but he takes his time. That there is no like minor character. Everybody, has their moment. And so that always stood out to me.
It always feels like all the actors are totally on board. They're totally there for Carpenter and like want to. His vision is. I don't know how much money was spent on this movie. Do you guys?
About $6 million. Yeah,
it's amazing.
Well, he's known for. I think if you look, even the nods that he gave to his peers, so George Romero and David Cronenberg, and those were guys that I think worked with, have a loyal crew base, crew base, people that want to work with them. This was he had done Halloween on a nothing budget with everybody pitch in kind of attitude. He did The Fog, and that was kind of a film that was made in post, where they shot it and then tested it, shot it, and filled. It took a while to get to where it's still one of my like all-time like Halloween go-to movies. I love The Fog. I watched the remake once, and I still watch the original. But then Escape from New York, like Dean Cundy, I think was one of his go-to guys, who is just an amazing cinematographer, and you can really he was in his element, because I think they had all these city blocks to just work with and light with fires and candlelight, and it just pops. It
works.
It
works.
There's nothing odd about it. I guess the bridge scene, they said, was on a bridge outside of St. Louis that was just, they remember night shoots, mosquitoes everywhere. It was a miserable place to shoot, but it has that vibe. And then you drop in his score, which I think you could watch that movie and enjoy it, but the score, brings it up 100%.
Makes it so much more intense.
Yeah, it's the one score that every little throwaway I think works. There's no, I like the title cut, I like the end cut, I like the flying into New York cut. Every Carpenter kind of musical interlude in that just works. Kurt Russell's the absolute badass. The remakes, they were talking, the one name I heard floated for it was Gerard Butler.
Ugh.
And
yikes.
Carpenter had said it has to be, and I believe it has to be an American hero. So it's one of the, James Bond should be British. I get it. I think Snake Plissken should be American. He wrote it around the time of the Nixon administration. So there was kind of a dour sense of politics and backstabbing and all this. The studios didn't make it, and it was shelved, and they brought it back out around the hostage crisis and Ronald Reagan, and this idea that Snake, is somebody being sent in to solve a problem nobody else can do. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, where the studios got interest. But there wasn't any desire to cast Kurt Russell in the role. He was a Disney kid. He was Elvis up until that point, but he was not any kind of tough guy. And I think I think that role is probably his favorite. It made him it totally changed his trajectory.
It made him a cult icon.
Yeah, I think he
had Big Trouble in Little China after
Thing.
The Thing.
I
think he'll probably do anything with. I think he'd work with John Carpenter on anything. But
they're one of my favorite director actor.
Yeah,
I love them.
But I think even he says Snake is his favorite part. Escape from L.A., I think it's got its pluses and minuses. We can talk about that. Escape from Earth, I was the third script that Carpenter was going to do in the trilogy. Kurt Russell, they were ready to roll. It never got made. Then the studios decided, no, we're not going to make it. We're going to go back to rebooting the idea. But I would love, that's to me is the holy grail. I'd love to read that story because it takes place right after Escape from L.A. ends. So it's kind of a Mad Max-ish vibe.
Yes. Yeah.
And there's the rich 1% are getting on a rocket ship to go to some space station, and Plisken's going to get on board and get. So it's that kind of. And I thought that's awesome. That's if that's right. That's I've never read it. I'd love to get a hold of that script. We could talk about the French Luc Besson ripoff that Carpenter sued him. Lockout. That they basically was just completely. We'll do Escape from New York, but we'll French it, make it a French movie or what. That's probably. But it was to the point where they felt we're suing it, and they settled out of court, but. The bit I saw of it, I was like, yeah, okay, it's Snake Plissken in a prison barge or something, I think is what this is. So a lot of people have it has a lot of imitations, but I still think the original is for a movie that was probably filmed in, 79, that was probably production was 79, 80. Yeah, it still rocks.
Oh yeah, stands the test of time for sure.
And it makes sense that a movie, this movie would have a New York that's been just decimated by crime, because in the 70s, New York City was the most dangerous place in America.
Yeah.
Like, you look at a film like Taxi Driver, like that shows the nitty gritty, dirty,
like 70, later in the 70s, Warriors, yeah.
Just what New York looked. It was gross. It was a world of
Taxi Driver,
villainy.
That's kind of the vibe,
yeah.
So to have the idea that it got so bad that they literally just built a wall around Manhattan and turned it into a prison. Yeah, okay.
Sure. It was easy to kind of, I can go with this. I can go with this concept.
Well, and again, the introduction, it doesn't allow you to question it. It's like, here you go.
This is what happens.
This is what's fucking happening in the movie, so get on board or get out. Yeah. And I'm all in.
Carpenter is definitely a fan of strong women. I think Adrienne Barbeau holds her own with the male cast. I like that she's the only female in The Thing, which cracks me up. If you really kind of want to go for obscure Carpenter trivia, she's the voice on the chess game. So that's how detailed you go. But he definitely she does not play like a wallflower to anybody. She's her death scene on the bridge is absolutely awesome. That was the last scene they shot. Apparently, that insert of her, because they didn't have her dying. They shot the footage all in St. Louis. And they realized, we don't actually show her dead.
Yeah.
So they did it in his garage.
Wow.
Where they put her down, kind of put some fake blood around, I think, and you see it. It's real quick on the screen, but that was literally the last piece of film that they did on the movie.
That's why I like how abrupt that is. That she just gets mauled, and then it's over. She dies. You move on. It's crazy.
My favorite part in the movie is when you think the Duke is going to get Snake, that the government abandoned Snake. Yeah. And the president shows up with a gun, shoots the Duke, and it's like, "You're a number one!" getting his revenge.
Well, even the Isaac Hayes, what did I teach you? Just that kind of can you? So
can't hear
you don't even know what the backstory is on that, but it's like, Christ, what the hell's this guy been going through? For the last hours that he's been kidnapped by these people. So it's just, it's absolutely kind of, the bits of dialogue that never fade. Call me Snake, and just his whole attitude.
He does his whole "you gotta smoke" thing.
Yes,
that's
straight out of
Carpenter
Assault on Precinct 13.
Right.
You gotta smoke.
There's so much little. It's one of those that I've like I said, I can't remember how many times I've seen it. I never lose kind of track of it. It's and it's always fresh when I put it on and rewatch it again.
Yes,
totally. So let's talk a bit about production and the cast and crew. Obviously, we know John Carpenter, what he's done. So after Escape from New York, Carpenter did The Thing with Kurt Russell again, Big Trouble in Little China with Kurt Russell again. Later on, he did They Live, another classic of the 80s. Roddy Piper.
I don't think he gets his... I mean, Carpenter, I'm butchering this, but he had said, in France, I'm a filmmaker. In Germany, I'm a journeyman. In the U.S., I'm a hack. And that's kind of sad, but there is something to that. A lot of his movies do not have stellar box office numbers.
No.
They come out, they fade. I think even Kurt Russell was like, it takes about 10 years for people to kind of catch up. And there is some truth to that, because I think every one of his films that have stood the test of time found their audience later, didn't find it. It wasn't a weekend, he's just not that kind of a filmmaker.
Yeah, very true. It's a shame. I think that if this guy had been box office successful, he would be counted amongst Spielberg and the greats these days.
I kind of do. I
already do too.
I kind of put him up there. I mean, he's one of my go-to guys, primarily as a writer. And I think I've done some work at Troublemaker Studios, and there is that Rodriguez connection, but there is a kinship. You can see that the idea of Rodriguez likes to do his own, film scores and as much, edits and writes and directs. John Carpenter, I think, probably would be considered his favorite director.
I can see that.
I remember, even they tried to get Carpenter to do the music for Grindhouse, but he passed. They wanted to get Mickey Rourke to play the bad guy in Death Proof, but he passed, and they ended up getting Kurt Russell. And so there's the idea that he played Escape from New York on set in Grindhouse, so he just has an affinity for the guy. But I think John Carpenter always seemed to struggle with studios. Even I think his biggest probably studio production is The Thing. and it tanked because it came out 2 weeks after E.T. was released.
Yes.
So,
yes.
But it's definitely gone on to be. I mean, they still show it every winter at McMurdo, Basin in Antarctica. It's how they start their winter off.
One of the best monster movies of all time.
And I love that. That even the scientists in Antarctica are like, yeah, this is the this is
So
the go-to.
badass, yeah.
And I saw the reboot or whatever you want to call it, and it was good, but I still go back to the original.
It's fine, yeah. But yeah, I'm with you.
And that's how I feel about every. Some of them were bombs, but I have yet to see one that surpassed the movie that he did.
It ain't happening.
The only one that came kind of close was Halloween, and even that didn't quite hit it.
Well, and part of the reason I loved the 2018 Halloween was because of the homage to him.
Yeah.
The music and, all that.
He came back to do the music. Like, he was involved.
With him and his sons, they did it.
So that's big. And it makes me really excited for, Halloween Kills and the stuff in the future.
Yeah.
Maybe if things are in the right hands, people who care and take care of it, it can be done correctly.
Maybe it's time. Maybe finally people are realizing that there is a way to do Carpenter, but you got to do it right.
Yeah.
Like, I know that the Big Trouble in Little China is in the pipeline with The Rock doing it, and there was such a blowback. People were like, don't screw it up, or just leave it alone, because it is one of those where they just leave it. And Escape from New York's the same. How many times it's been up through the studio pipeline to reboot it with different writers and directors and cast members is just, and I don't know. I honestly, why they just don't let him do the third one in the trilogy is beyond me. But I think it's studio decision making. But that goes all the way back to Kurt Russell's too. He's Elvis. He's not a tough guy. What are you trying to cast him? And Carpenter stood up for him. And I think him and Deborah Hill just were smart. They're the quintessential kind of producer, writer, director, producer partnership at that time. I think Escape is a MGM film, but it was Avco. Avco produced The Fog for them and Escape from New York. I mean, he's one of the quintessential independent directors in a weird way, that he just he idolized Howard Hawks, and you can watch Rio Bravo and see Assault on Precinct 13, Goes to Mars from that. You watch, Howard Hawks did A Thing from Another World. You even see that in the original Halloween. The kids are watching that when, on Halloween night. That's the horror movie that's on television. To have him years later go and actually remake The Thing. The entry to The Thing is still the graphic when the word comes up is taken directly from the Howard Hawks movie. So he always tends to strong women, you can just see a lot of connections, and the idea that Howard Hawks would jump genres too. I think Carpenter has an affinity for that. He is not just a one-trick pony. He's kind of bounces all around. So that's probably one of the reasons why he's just one of those guys that I'll give a nod to or an homage to in different works and things I'm doing, because his work is still one of those guys that I go back to all the time.
Oh, hell yeah. His stuff is so intense and entertaining, just repeatedly. It just gets better with every viewing. You get lost in his work. It's really cool.
Well, it's what I as a kid, all this Carpenter stuff, mainly this and Assault, I feel is what I envision an action movie to be. It's what I want I can't quite put my finger on that before I see it, you know what I mean? But once I see it, I'm like, oh, there you go, there is. And I think people in Germany and France saying those things, because they're not used to fluff in Europe with their films. It's a lot more quick paced, not fucking around. That's what Carpenter's all about, and I'm not really used to that growing up. In the 2000s and 2010s, our action movies are there's a lot more obvious studio decisions, and this guy just
when it's all based on weekend numbers, you've got 2 days to make it or not, and about his films is they never fade, or people keep going back to them. That's why I'll have 7 different versions of it, not because I'm a collector or something. It's because I like it when they clean it up and but it is one of those where I don't feel like I'm buying something for the sake of I want it. It's not just buying it for a collection or something. It's like, I want to see the best version.
Yeah.
When they re-released The Thing and cleaned it up, it was like, wow, just to see it on the screen again like that. So his movies still have that effect because I think it's strong writing, strong directing, strong casting. He would just go back. I don't think he'd allow other people. That's why his name's on the top. John Carpenter's Fog, John Carpenter's Escape from New York. I do think I got the vibe, and that he's a very open director. I think he allows actors to kind of take what's on the page and make them three-dimensional. He's not, say it this way, put the comma here, this is the way. I think he allows for give and take.
Smoke that cigarette how you prefer to smoke it.
Right, and make that character your own. And that's why I think a lot of the actors and crew stay with, you can see if they stayed with them. And directors who are prima donnas and stuff don't have that. And he clearly had a group of people that would want to work on anything.
They bought in, yeah. Well, they were like, "Hey, 10 years from now, this will be a hit."
Well, and I'm just trying to think of going back to Escape from New York. Just other Season Hubley, like both of Kurt Russell and John Carpenter's ex-wives were in. John Carpenter was married to Adrienne Barbeau, right? And she's in it. And then that's Kurt Russell's was Kurt Russell's wife. I never understood why she got a special appearance in the credits. I always thought that was kind of, because I thought, well, I've never seen her in anything again, or she was a model or something. But I don't know if that was in the contract. But when you watch the opening credits, it's like special appearance by Season Hubley, and I'm like, oh yeah, she's the woman in the chock full of nuts that gets pulled in the floor. But it was just like, I guess, she was Kurt Russell's wife at the time, but they put her in the movie, and she does a great job. But it was like, you look at that. I look at that cast and think of the credit roll, and it's like that. Everybody shines. It's probably,
I think for me the biggest surprise is Ernest Borgnine.
Yeah, we haven't really talked about him at all, and he was awesome in it. The idea of this cab driver still driving the same cab after the world goes to hell.
What did he do to get thrown in here?
I think he just stayed. He never left. That was my vibe. When they turned into a prison, this is my home. This is where I live. So
it's kind of like Morgan Freeman in Shawshank when he's like, This is what I know. It's my home.
The world went to hell around him, and he just still kind of went and goes to the theater and hangs out. And the idea that Broadway's a hellhole, I love that. And, no man's land. It's just there's so many. Just as we're talking about it and thinking about it, there's just so much that I can go back to that. Just the outfits, the cast, the costume design on that is awesome. And they probably didn't have a lot of, because like you said, it was a $6 million budget or something. Even
which they probably spent a lot on traveling to St. Louis and whatnot. Yeah.
Well, just getting the town. So he took shortcuts, but he was like, all right, we're going to do 2 days in New York, and then we'll do the rest. And he was always able. He didn't have to solve the problem by spraying the money hose. He would figure out ways of solving the problem creatively. Yeah. And it still holds up. This was pre-digital effects, so those were matte paintings. That when you see the skyline of New York, they were drawn on glass, and then they'd set the camera up. Really old school techniques to kind of get the point across. They would be. I think there's a scene where the helicopter's landing, and all the prisoners they have the briefcase. There's no tape inside, but they're like waving the helicopter down, and the helicopter lands, and you see the New York skyline behind it. And they shot it. It was an empty field with these guys waving it down. And then in between the camera and the scene is a piece of glass with the city drawn on it. Wow. And so that's what's reflected. That's what we see the city in the background.
That's incredible.
That wasn't there. I love those kind of shortcuts.
That's fucking filmmaking. Yeah.
The idea, I think they had 2 helicopters, but they would just repaint the number on the side so it looked like it was a fleet. So here's 7, this is 10, this is 2. I love that, of ways of kind of stretching the dollar. And the old school effects like that hold up, because when you look at the CGI effects in Escape from L.A., that if George Lucas can go back and retool his movies all the time, they should let Carpenter go back, and because the CGI effects in that one have a PlayStation 1 vibe to them, or 2, but they don't hold up. Where the effects from the movie in the 80s, kind of I buy them. I never once think that's not New York. It's like, oh, that's New York, and they were filming that in California. So it's just things like that are amazing to me.
The effects in Escape from L.A., I was reading into it. The guys who did that, it was their first time doing a movie, and they weren't entirely sure what to do.
Wow.
So they just kind of winged it, and this is what they ended up with.
It's not bad, but it clearly says this is a fake effect.
Yeah.
From the submarine to the... we can go on and on about it. But yeah, the helicopter, it just looks off. Where I can rewatch Escape from New York, and it doesn't look off. It's still, and this was done, in 1979, 1980. So that's amazing that those. And you got to give James Cameron, of all that, one of his first jobs at New World, props for a lot of the.
He's always been ahead of his time with digital effects.
Yeah,
for sure.
And the throwback to the Roger Corman way of we'll figure out there's a way to solve the problem, and I love that that's how they did that. Like the idea of just getting city blocks that were burnt out from a fire in St. Louis, and then doing whatever the hell they wanted to with these blocks that they're shipping a plane in, little things like that. That just, it's like, oh, this is how we'll get around this. Mm-hmm. We can't afford to have a plane crash, So we'll kind of fake it, and you as the audience member never kind of, you don't. I completely buy into it.
So we're still just looking into the camera. That's it.
Yeah, it's amazing.
We're into it. At that point, we're like, this is badass. Of course. So cool. It grossed about $25 million at the box office, so it was a commercial success, critical success, but later on, Escape from LA kind of killed that success.
Well, and that's, I think, because Escape from LA didn't do as well, he didn't get to do Escape from Earth, and I know they were ready to do it, and then Deborah Hill died, then Carpenter kind of left the industry, it's one of those where I don't know. I'd love to see if they did like an animated version of it or something, since the script exists, just to wrap up the trilogy. I think you'd probably get Kurt Russell to do the voice, and that would be awesome.
That'd be cool.
There's no way. To me, there's not a reason why that one is just sitting on a shelf somewhere. It doesn't. It needs to get made, just because I'd love to see what their idea was to wrap up the trilogy. And I again, I remember Escape from LA getting bombed when it came out, or people like, that's stupid. And then you have some people that as soon as the surf scene happened, they were out. But I think it's grown. People have embraced it more over the years, which again goes to a lot of his work is like that. They Live is probably a great example of a movie that came out that didn't seem to connect with an audience at the time. That's only gotten better.
Yeah.
And I think it's even transcended now cult status to just people. Oh yeah, that's a hit. Roddy Piper in that movie was just as it was again. Why you're casting a wrestler in this part? That what? And he's iconic, and he was an absolute iconic in that, and just killed him and David Keith and. It's just you can really go down all kinds of different, talking different Carpenter movies that are just he's one of those directors like that I put up there with, like you were saying, Spielberg and these guys, but to me it's like Carpenter, Romero. These were the guys that I look to as well. Okay, they made films, but they made films not by going to the studio and getting as much money as they could, by getting a budget and maximizing, squeezing every dollar they could out of it and making it work. And those are the movies that still hold up.
Yeah, I think for our generation, like people our age, I think Tarantino is big in kind of reviving and helping Carpenter. Obviously, he has a huge respect for him. And that's big for me as a kid. If I'm 14, I'm like, well, if Tarantino likes it, then I should probably check it out.
Yeah, Tarantino, I think, is the go-to for classic cinema, and a lot of the people that he'll bring back that the younger generation wouldn't have any idea who they were.
Exactly, yeah. He's kind of
totally,
teaching us, yeah.
Totally iconic connection to Carpenter. We can really see that. I think him and Rodriguez both.
Yes.
Are just big fans. I mean, that was
in Death Proof in the bar, you got Jack Burton's tank top hanging behind the bar.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
All kinds of little nods to it.
So cool.
And I think even when they announced that that Kurt Russell was going to be the lead in Death Proof, this picture they showed was him as Snake Plissken.
Yes,
it's
of course.
It's the most iconic.
Surprised that's not his IMDb photo. So cool, man. Let's talk a little bit about the plot.
Yeah.
We open in 1988, a 400% increase in crime. U.S. has turned Manhattan into a maximum security prison. 50-foot wall surrounds the island. All the bridges are loaded with landmines, and there is no escape. It's a life sentence.
Love that's Jamie Lee Curtis, too, that's saying all that, which is awesome, because she's not credited at all in the movie, so clearly it was, I'll come in and do it. Probably a day of voiceover.
Out,
It's like John Larroquette in Texas Chainsaw. It's like, what? Why would he do the voiceover? And it's like, I think it was just, I'll do a favor for a friend, which goes back to the whole Carpenter has
a couple years ago, he kind of helped me out with Halloween, so.
Yeah, it's that kind of like, sure, I'll do anything for you. Come down for a weekend and record it.
If it's his vision, then sure, yeah.
But and I'm glad. I like that they continued that. She starts off Escape from LA too, so it was an idea of building of the world. This is how we're going to build this world. And if they did Escape from Earth, it would probably be the same thing. She would bring us in the intro, so it's a consistency of how those kind of scripts roll together.
The continuity is really cool.
Yeah.
And I love all the throwaway lines about like you mentioned in Escape from LA, New Vegas, Thailand.
Yeah, that's an awesome
things like that. Like this whole world of just crazy shit.
Because it's easy to kind of then take, just run with that concept of like, I could see the U.S. taking over Thailand and making it an adult Las Vegas. So that's not far-fetched. It's just, sure, okay, I roll with that. And that's where Carpenter's really good at and his screenwriters are really good at kind of toying with that, playing with that. I had seen, I own a copy of John Carpenter's Creature from the Black Lagoon. I guess he was going to do that at one time. And I remember scooping it up and reading it. The same guy that wrote The Thing wrote it. I'm blanking on the writer, which is sad, but it's the same screenwriter. And then when I read it, I think it never got made, but the film Anaconda, I think, took a lot from that script. So it was funny how that concept did kind of show up. But yeah, that was one that Carpenter was going to do.
Bill Lancaster?
Bill Lancaster.
Bill Lancaster. Damn, that would have been neat, but that's kind of the thing with him. Like, you'd think after getting so many eventual hits, after people realized Escape from New York and The Thing and Halloween and these movies weren't going away, that he would have gotten a little bit more leeway from the studios.
What have you done for me lately? It's sad. That's kind of the vibe. And it wouldn't matter. Yeah, to me, he's like an absolute icon, and he would still have to go trolling for dollars and impress some studio executive who wasn't even born when Halloween came out, this kind of stuff. So it's sad, but that's what he would have to do. I think he just got tired of it. It's like, hell, I don't want to do this anymore.
Fucking hard to make movies, man. Yeah.
Well, he was like, I'd rather just play video games and hang out and smoke, and that's really what he was perfectly fine doing that. Is that, yeah, sure, I look at the guy as like, hell, he's done enough. Yeah. I'm cool. If he doesn't want to make another movie again, I can live with that. If he'd rather just do his music, totally get it. But there is kind of I would wonder what like a new Carpenter film would be, or if he picked a genre, like what he would do, and if he could do anything he wanted, what would he do the third Escape, or would he do something, what would be another Carpenter movie that he would do? Would he remake or what? That'd be awesome to see.
Well, I would hope that he would get some kind of a spark back, and we wouldn't just get another like leggy blonde movie that completely disappears, like Ghost of Mars or The Ward.
Ghost of Mars, it's a Assault from Precinct 13 again in space. That's it. But and it does it. I don't know. It's another one of those where it's weird. It just as the time goes on, I dismissed it when it came out. Like, this is stupid, but I like. It seems to it's growing on me. Vampires is one where I'll admit I thought it was miscast. I thought James Woods I was like, what? And then the one Baldwin brother that you're like, what? So I just it's like that script was probably awesome, but I actually didn't. Some of the casting kind of didn't work for me, but I've rewatched it. It's got a great supporting cast in that, and it's got there's moments that I really like, but it's some of his I can see where. I'm not a giant fan of Prince of Darkness, but there are people who that's their favorite. In the Mouth of Madness, there are people that's the one that they point to, and I'm like, I still kind of go back to I think The Fog, The Thing, Escape from New York, Halloween, They Live. That are kind of my they can be constant rotation, and I'll never get bored with them.
Totally, man. And the plot in this movie, basically, the main MacGuffin is this tape that the president has on him that kind of gives like the plan to de-escalate a growing threat of nuclear war with the Soviet Union, which of course that always comes up in every movie, almost every movie in the 70s and 80s that deals with some kind of apocalypse or action. It's always Cold War.
Yeah, and I mean, China and the Soviet Union will go back home. That's the whole kind of he's got to get this. But yeah, everything was this was the day after nuclear war was kind of just. Not over everybody's head, but it was there, as a possibility, and it was definitely playing with the monster of the moment.
And Air Force One gets hijacked by a terrorist, and the president is equipped with a tracking bracelet. He's handcuffed to this briefcase that describes the secret to nuclear fusion.
And people have said, is there really a escape pod on Air Force One? And I remember even the Air Force One or this Harrison Ford movie kind of toyed with that of get him in the escape pod, but I don't think there is one realistically. But I think that's one of those where we're not going to confirm or deny vibe. But it is to me, it's like how are we going to get him? Have him put in an escape pod. I like the idea of jettison him out in his little dome where he's
the president.
The concept if that falls to the earth, he's going to be fine in that. All right, that makes sense.
Imagine President Trump in a
round ball kind of dropping from sky. Yeah, he's going to be fine. And there's only one guy. There's one seat, so it's one parachute. That's it. Screw the rest of you.
Well, yeah.
So just that whole idea of the Secret Service. You're all going down. All the press corps. Yep, hell with you.
Well, President Pleasance crash lands in New York City and is immediately captured by the Duke of New York. He's number one. He's the guy who runs New York City. And his right-hand man, Romero, goes to talk to the soldier sent in to get the president and says,
Well, and that even look at Frank Doubleday with that, because I'm sure on page it's a couple lines for that role. That's it, and he killed it. And just his mannerisms, his when he hisses at the guy. That wasn't in the script. I know he just did that as that character, and it was riveting. So what he was able to do with a part that, and that's where I love, where they'll take, okay, here's my part, and then they'll get an actor who will just make that part come to life. And I can't. And he sets it. Kurt Russell had said he sets the tone, and it's true. I mean, when you see that guy come out of the fog or come out of the night and walks up with the finger kind of wrapped in you're like, oh Jesus, what the hell is beyond that? This is the guy. Who else is in this place? So it really just sets it up. I love that. It's the best introduction of a world through a character I can think of. Like one guy just walking up, and it's like, I gotta get everything about this place. This is gonna be effing crazy now, you know. But and on page, I'm sure it was Romero walks up, said, "Here's your dialogue." That's it. There wasn't a lot of and to me, Frank Doubleday was the guy who just made that role walk and talk for a throwaway part, honestly. And that's
he's plucked like right out of the Road Warrior in this world that is a city just completely forgotten by society.
Yeah, it totally was a George Miller kind of character look. The design, his hair, when they're shooting the president, when they're doing target practice, and he comes up to him and he kind of like takes his hand over his hair for no reason, I don't know why, but it was just a throwaway little, dressing the mannequins in wigs, and you're like, you don't know what this guy, what is his deal, but it's like, oh, you don't want to be captured by him, is what your kind of walk away is.
Oh no. It's crazy. And the commissioner of New York City, I guess, Bob Hawke, that's Lee Van Cleef, says there's only one man who can save the president, and it's Snake Plissken. He's former special forces, recently convicted, attempting to rob the Federal Reserve. He's about to be thrown into New York City as a prisoner.
Well, you got Charles Cypress, who's the Secretary of State, and he's like, well, send our team in, and he's like, I got this idea. So I think Lee Van Cleef, the idea is they got this guy, and they're like, all right, I'm going to lean on him. And then it really is kind of a Clint Eastwood Leone vibe between the two.
Yeah. I mean, he's going to be thrown into prison anyway. Might as well give it a shot.
But if you watch, I mean, because you got to think at the time, too, Lee Van Cleef was probably, Jesus, he was in High Noon. I mean, he goes all the way back. Yeah. He was one of those quintessential Western actors, and then really shined in the Leone pictures. Because Leone loved his face. And Leone was very much wide shots and close-ups. And if you look at the... he just is his face. You can see the mileage on that guy, basically.
Yeah.
But I think he was at this would have been, he was probably, I think it was a TV show where he did Manimal or something. Where I remember he was like a guy who, this was like on a crappy NBC show, but that was where Lee Van Cleef was at in the 80s. Where, like, I don't know why, he was like a ninja or something. I got to look it up. It was a crappy 80s show.
That sounds great.
He really kind of came back as, like this role, I think, was that I can think of around the time. I don't think there was anything else like it. And to me, it was a throwback to what he did with the Leone pictures in the 60s. So
he's the sheriff in town.
Yeah, but he played it. I bet he had a lot of fun on it. That was kind of the vibe I got, where you could see him and Kurt Russell, just the connection, the way they're back and forth played. That I bet when they called, I don't know how many takes they would do of those scenes, but I bet they just had an absolute blast, kind of just doing that dialogue and chewing it up. And it's such, like I said, throwaway, kind of 1-2 words, kind of tough guy lines back and forth, and they both just hold their own when they're when he's interrogating them in the screen or in that scene. But yeah, it's awesome. It's really awesome.
One of my favorite throwaway lines at the beginning of this movie is when Snake's being brought into the like transitional area, and you hear the intercom say like, "This, you are now in New York City. If you would like to opt for immediate execution, please go to your left," or something like that. And you just, what the fuck?
Oh, I like when he's like he's like president of what, just kind of being a smart ass. That's not funny, Pliskin. Things like that are just little things like that, but I just love that.
Get a new president.
Yeah, like something you don't give a shit about. Nuclear fusion, something you don't give a shit about. This kind of Snake doesn't care about anything. And I guess I saw it's in the Blu-ray where he did a David Letterman type interview or something. He was talking about when, like, on the press junket for the movie when it was released, and he kind of saw him as Snake isn't really political. He doesn't care about anybody but himself and the mission, and everybody is kind of a means to an end. And that's how he kind of saw the character of Just. But I don't know. I see him as, and Carpenter, when he wrote it, said he didn't have anybody in mind, but he had a friend. He said, anybody who has a snake tattooed on him anywhere is my kind of hero. And so I always liked that, of trying to figure out who this guy was, Snake Plissken, like how the name came about and how that, how he was on the page and written. And there wasn't a lot there, so you can tell that they really, the actors and directors probably just threw different ideas and concepts back and forth to make that character who he was.
Yeah. I don't know. I think when you look at Snake's actions in this film and in Escape from L.A., he's forced to do all of this. They inject him with a toxin and say, like, you're going to die in 24 hours unless you come back with the president. And I see him as kind of almost like an anarchist, just like, I'm going to fuck up the world because you keep fucking with me.
But I like that even that idea you had about turning the Gulf fire around and running off to Canada, that kind of like good creative kind of writing of keep him grounded. So, because trying to stay a couple of heads ahead of the audience, saying, well, why didn't he just leave if he's in a plane? Why did he fly away? And kind of setting him up. But also, classic Hitchcock put a ticking clock on in the movie, and that's what the injections in his neck kind of. But he also he doesn't come across as like a super. I hate needles and stuff, and so he does make him human in a way. This tough guy who. My favorite scene is, and I think Kurt Russell even talked about it, was when he just sat down. He's like, I don't know what the hell else to do. And he's kind of sitting in the wreckage with his life kind of ticking away, not knowing what to do next. And the movie goes on. But the idea that the hero would just kind of have these moments, I think, to me, made him not a superhero or made him grounded in reality. And I like that. So Snake to me is a real guy. Like he's not one of these, he's not Captain America.
Yeah.
No, yes. No.
Well, at the end, when he rescues the president's getting shaved and he's about to be on TV, and Snake's just like, I just want to know what you thought about the people who died to get you here. And he just gives a, business card answer like, oh, well, I admire their sacrifice.
Right, without even looking at him. That was a great, just kind of the way they shot that.
And then he just rips the tape apart.
And you got to give a nod to American Bandstand. That was a clever piece of music and a great, idea that it's playing in Cabby. He switches it. So Snake still is like a F you to everybody at the end. I love that. That's how the movie goes out. Great ending. Absolute classic ending.
So
over a John Carpenter score where he's like, fuck everybody. That's really kind of I don't care if the nuclear war happens now. I got your guy, but I'm still giving a screw you to everybody. I love that. That's just awesome.
He does the same thing in Escape from L.A. when he blows up the world's power.
I think the beats are pretty much you could probably I think I'd seen something where they laid the movies together and everything. The beats are all almost identical. They probably just kind of stayed different characters, cabbies, Steve
He even gets
Buscemi,
shot in the leg. Same deal.
Same deal. So it's a total fanboy throwback kind of thing.
But Cuervo Jones ain't no Duke of New York.
No, he's his own guy. I mean, Isaac Hayes was one of those where he was like, "Yeah, let's do a sequel. I know I'm dead, but I'll come back," kind of thing. He considered it like one of his best roles, and justifiably so. He was absolutely awesome in it.
Killer.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So the deal is, Snake gets sent into New York City. He's got 24 hours to get the president and the tape back, or else he's going to be killed with these micro explosives they put in his arteries.
Awesome use of the World Trade Center, which probably one of the most iconic images of the World Trade Center in cinema, I would think. I mean, I'm trying to think of other ones where pre 9/11 kind of thing, but it's a sharp example of seeing a New York skyline that's no longer there.
Yeah. It's a shame, but I do like that is the tallest point in New York City at the time. Mm-hmm. And it does make sense to land on there, and Brain figures that out. Like, he does like the math. Like, it's the only place he could have landed.
Right. I thought that was sharp.
Really smart. The screenplay here really is, like, just perfect. Everything makes sense. Like, there's no plot holes at all.
Well, and I like the idea that in Carpenter, like I said, wrote it during the Nixon administration, where there was really this distrust about government, and the idea that, that thread really runs through the movie, where that the good guys aren't really the good guys, and Snake is who's really the good guys, even the bad guys in a way. Everybody's a shade of gray in the movie, and I like that. There's not white hats and black hats, and that to me is Carpenter does that. Romero does that a lot, where it plays up realistic characters, and I honestly think it's a great writing tool. If your characters are grounded in realism, you can create any world around them, and the audience will follow.
Yes,
and I love that. And Carpenter's a great example of consistently doing that. And honestly, it's where the remakes fall apart. I think they lose that sense of They just want to we'll remake the Fog, but then you don't really care about any of the characters, right?
Yeah.
And the whole point is you've got to care about the characters because then you'll go along the journey with them. And it's when they die, when Brain gets blown up, and then Maggie goes down, and the characters start. Cabby goes. You feel something for these people,
yeah.
Where you don't in a lot of other movies, I think.
No, they're supposed to be the bad guys too. They're the criminals in New York City.
Yeah.
But they go out of their way to help Snake save the president.
Right.
Well, it's like you're saying. There's like no redeeming people.
Well, he's a horrible president.
Yeah.
So he's Donald Pleasance is just the idea that he's the only survivor of the crash, and then it is kind of cool when he does the machine gun the guy. But even then they know that the time code thing is ticking away on Pliskin, and he stops him. But again, Carpenter amps up the tension every step of the way. Yeah. I think he finally clears the things in his neck with 3 seconds to go or something. But it is one of those where once you get going, I think, and that's probably why they cut out that beginning scene, because they wanted to get to the action as fast as they could. Yeah. I honestly would love to see it. I like seeing the outtakes, and I would have loved to have seen the Federal Reserve Depository robbery kind of thing, and just the whole concept of an underground subway going from one coast to the other.
I actually think the best way to go about remaking this, which I don't want them to, but I think a TV show, like a mini series, where you could have separate episodes.
Yeah.
Kind of going in detail, like if you had a whole episode about a heist, a bank robbery. Oh my God, that'd be brilliant.
They tried a comic book series. I read a couple of them on like Snake Plissken.
Yeah.
They like took the idea of this world and expanded it. If New York's a prison, what's Ohio like? What's every place else in the country like?
Yeah. What's Chicago like?
I don't know if they've worked. They seem to have had a run. I remember hearing about video games. They were going to kind of expand play in the world, but I don't know. It's one of those where he created this world and nobody's ever seemed to capitalize on it. Mm-hmm. Maybe that would be where the remake would go. But I can only think it's gone through so many hands now that it's probably going to suck whenever it comes out. Yeah, whenever they finally release something, it'll be like, okay. Yeah, and everybody will still watch the original. So
I actually think it's kind of good they left out the bank robbery scene, because I do like that from the get-go, you know nothing about Snake. You just know he's got a badass name. He hates authority. And they're forcing him to save the president. Mm-hmm. And you kind of get to know him as the movie goes along. And I think if you started out as seeing him rob a bank, seeing him like mourn his friend who gets shot, you'd know too much about him.
Yeah.
And I think this is better. Personally.
You feel that way also in Assault on Precinct 13, where these are
Napoleon Wilson. You know nothing about that guy.
Literal criminals.
You just know where his loyalties lie in the moment.
Give me a gun.
Yeah.
Well, that's I probably go back to that one as much as Escape from New York, because it's
my favorite. Yeah,
it's awesome.
I fucking adore it. Yeah,
and it's so threadbare. I mean, and I think he did that after Dark Star, so he was still in his early 20s. I mean, I think it was Deborah Hill's a script girl in that one. So she wasn't even producer; they just met. He did it. The cops are like friends from UCLA, his college friends. It was basically like, let's go make a movie, guys.
Yes.
Kind of vibe.
It kind of inspired me, like, I could do this, Like if I had the right people who are willing to work.
Find an empty building and a bunch of friends.
You
can make Assault on Precinct 13.
That honestly could be its own podcast, because there's all kinds of stories of, I can go down that, of just like when the guys, when Austin Stoker's driving in, and you can see the other cars next, where they're peeking in because they've clearly got a camera rig attached to the side of this car filming the guy. And you got to imagine the cameras in the 70s where it's this giant camera stuck to the side. But you see people looking over like, what are you guys doing over there, kind of thing, as the cars are going by. But he had to use it. They, he was saying the police station on either side was downtown LA or something. And he kind of faked it where he only kept the camera so you see the police station. And then when you do another shot, and that was somewhere in abandoned LA, and so it showed that so he built the idea that the station was out in the middle of nowhere, even though it was surrounded by everything. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can go with that. Napoleon Wilson, I think, is not only the coolest name, but coolest villain and coolest. Yeah. I so wanted to see more of that guy. They're, whole how it wraps up. They walk out together. The music, you just do a whole hour on that one alone, easy.
Yeah,
killer.
We could do an hour on any of the Carpenters.
Yeah, you really can.
He's amazing.
There's so much fun to talk about. So,
the fight Roddy Piper and Keith David, They Live fight. That's awesome. The South Park parody. The first one I remember when Timmy was fighting that like total parody of that. it's still considered, and they mapped that out themselves. They were like, oh, this is how, because he was a wrestler, and they were like, let's. But I'm sure on the paper, on the script, was a paragraph of they fight. Had no idea that it was going to be this iconic kind of scene that has been, I think transcended They Live. And the makeup effects for the, you could do a podcast and just his makeup artist, Rob Bottin in The Thing, and how horrible that went on set. And everybody thought, what the hell is this kind of blob that he's spraying with KY jelly? And I don't understand it. But the way they shot it, held up much more than the remake CGI that they spent probably $25 million or whatever to make, where that was Rob Bottin, had done the effects work on. He was Blake in The Fog. He was the chief ghost. So that's how they worked on that. And then, but I remember all the guys in The Thing were like, this ain't gonna work because it looked horrible, And he was like, just put more slime on it or put shadow on it, this and that. Or they would be waiting on set, like, when is Rob going to show up with the monster? And then the whole idea of every other monster was a guy in a suit. Even Alien was a guy in a suit, tall guy, but it was a guy in a suit. Where this was a completely blob-morphic thing. Yeah. That still holds up to anything I think you can put up, against. So
it's amazing, and it's all just KY and raspberry jam.
Well, and just amazing sculptures, but it's a believable monster, and that's, again, and he also throws back to believable characters. You connect with every one of those guys. He introduces 10 guys right up front. Some of my favorite maybe we're at war with Norway, favorite throwaway Carpenter line, or when the guy's smoking and he's like, "I'll take you up." He's like smoking a joint. He's like, "I haven't, Mac. I'll take you up." And like, "No, or screw you, Palmer." He's like, "Hey, thanks for thinking about it, though." I still say that. I randomly say that to people. "Hey, thanks for thinking about it, though." That's a total Carpenter line, So his dialogue sticks with you. I mean, we're sticking an Escape from New York. It's just the Bob Houck, Call Me Snake. They send in their best man. We're gonna send him out in the hood of my car from the neck up. Just all that stuff. It's awesome.
I love everyone constantly saying, "I thought you were dead."
Thought you were dead. Yeah. They carried that over, and that was also good too. They didn't take a lot of time, like you're saying. They cut the bank robbery up, but they didn't give him any backstory. Yeah. So all these, like, who's Frisco Bob and all this stuff, and what is his connection to Harry Dean Stanton? They were, screw it.
Goes right back to Leone and the man with no name.
Yeah, they don't stop and tell you anything. They're just like, yeah, that's not the story we're going to tell. This is the story we're going to tell, and it allows you to kind of fill in the blanks if you want or not. But I like that. That's where they feel like they have to explain everything to the audience now. Carpenter was just like, this is going to be a thrilling story, and we'll allow you to kind of come up with your backstory.
He always did that, with Halloween. Like, he gives you, oh my God, he just tells you what Michael did. He doesn't tell you who he is.
No, and that was, you can go back to, that was Rob Zombie's probably where he dropped the ball, was he changed the monster into some, kid who lived in the trailer park and listened to heavy metal. And that was kind of, some Rob Zombie kid, basically.
Yeah,
which is ridiculous. Yeah, that kind of characterization is
where Carpenter kept him as the boogeyman, and so you can go back to less is more kind of vibe. Where
we always say that. Yeah. I mean, like Jaws. I mean, you go back to 1975.
But that was because the shark didn't work.
Exactly,
and so they worked around it.
Yes, I think that goes back to what you were saying with Carpenter, is you adapt and you make the film. Yeah, you don't.
And the filmmakers that we look at today those are the guys who and I always they don't solve the problem by spraying the money hose, because they can't, or then you get too many suits in the kitchen, and then it just flies. Yeah, you get so many writers or so many suits telling you this is what you do. It loses that identity, and then it's nothing that sticks.
Well, and your Carpenter, you have to have something as a creator to push you and challenge you. So you're like, fuck that. Yeah, I just want to. I know he obviously knew what his vision was in his head. Yeah, and he was going to accomplish it with a certain amount of money, no matter what.
And I like that. I mean, you can't take away from Dean Cundy, who's his eye and cinematography skills pop in that. And you got to figure at the time too, the cameras there were. Hell, was a Steadicam even invented? So these were tracks and things that were laid down. I don't think they were
using it yet, because Kubrick is like one of the first guys to really get a hold of it with The Shining.
With The Shining,
and that's 80. So
I think if maybe it was, but I mean, so the setups were giant, like the idea of video cameras and all that. None of that. It was all film and
super creative.
Giant lights, giant cameras. So having somebody like Dean Cundy kind of lead, take the charge and build the world the way they did. I mean, because like I said, it was just a bombed out, burnout section of St. Louis that they took over. There wasn't probably a lot of set dressing that they added to it. It was mainly put a fire here, put a fire there, and then let the shadows kind of play. They didn't bleach it out, so it's dark.
St. Louis, another city, was known for violent crime and just gross.
Well, the idea that I can't imagine, filming it in New York. They couldn't have afforded it. What were they going to do? So the idea, we're going to build a set? No. And so he worked around it. Oh, hey, let's do it out here. And I can't imagine there were many productions being shot in St. Louis. So, it was a creative way of solving a problem. Well, how are you going to do that on a budget? Oh, this is how you do it on a budget. That is why I think his movies stand the test of time. A lot of that is because he's a creative guy that won't allow a situation to beat him, because what was the big sci-fi movie in that time was Star Wars. So, what was the budget on that? And so Escape from New York, I think, is just as, stands the test of time. It's science fiction, but I can't think of any other movies around that time that were like that. Other sci-fi movies that came out then, like Logan's Run.
I think Blade Runner still looks pretty cool.
Blade Runner looks
times.
awesome.
Yeah. This one, he knows me. I'm not a huge Star Wars guy. For what they have,
but a lot of
impressive.
If you're thinking of like science fiction in the 70s, 80s, a lot of that shit looks like it was made in the 70s and 80s on a dime. This was a movie that was made on a low budget compared to other movies around it, and probably what's on the screen looks 10 times more than what they spent. And I think that was having smart people behind the scenes and on camera, and allowing those people to bring their own skills to the table. If you're the kind of director who's comfortable with the material you're working with and allow the people around you to bring their best, they just make you look better. They make the whole picture look better. Yeah, and that's I think true. What he does.
Awesome, man. And it does, like the way he filmed it, it feels and looks like New York City. Like you never doubt for a second that he's not in a burned out, apocalyptic
filming on location
New York City that's been just decimated by crime.
Yeah, no, it's one of those where, it does, like, I think actually Escape from LA looks more dated than Escape from New York.
Yeah, very true.
For sure.
And that just comes back to, practicality. Mm-hmm. So Snake goes into New York City, lands in the World Trade Center on a stealth glider. Great scene. Really smart.
Oh, yeah.
Really good score that goes with that. Because figure that was New World Effects that were doing that. So they had, I don't know what the glider was, but it's one of those where you take the music out and it's still visually stunning, but the score just layers that and just makes it pop. Yeah, that's a gorgeous scene.
The score feels so much like a ticking clock. Like you just get the sense of urgency so much with that score.
It's like I'm playing a video game. Yeah, it's crazy.
And I love that it was, it's him and a couple of his friends. Like they did. He's had different band names. Like they did a song in Big Trouble in Little China, him and Nick Castle and stuff. But it's just him and his pals that would do this. And I think he said, like, going back to Assault on Precinct 13, I think he did that in half an hour, which is crazy. That coming up with that, but it's still it's you. Then Halloween, but Escape from New York, I think, is such a layered synthesizer, which again feels very 80s, but for some crazy reason doesn't feel. This movie doesn't feel 80s. It doesn't have that.
No, it's timeless.
Yeah, I think that's why when people still discover it, it stands out because it doesn't feel like it's a moment of time. Or again, going back to LA, Escape from LA really feels like it is in the late 90s with the music choices that go around the score. But I think Carpenter was smart to keep it just that synthesizer score. The only other music that's in it is the Nick Castle Broadway song. That's it. I think it's synthesizers.
Which is a wonderful touch.
Yeah, and that was something I guess he let Nick Castle do.
And like you just points out again, you just like let people use their talent and you just kind of run with it.
And he was a big Broadway guy, so they were like, let's have these guys have a Broadway show. And that sounds crazy, but it really works.
It works, yes.
When that happens, and you're just these guys playing with any instruments they can get, and that the idea that, well, okay, some of New York prisoners this is how they would kill their time, pass their time. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, I buy it,
And that's where Snake runs into Cabby, who's, everybody recognizes Snake.
There's a scene where Snake goes to the theater and goes down, and there's a woman getting raped, and that he ignores it, and that people had said, could that scene be shot today? And I go, probably, yeah, okay, I give them that. That's probably a dated scene. Probably not, that they could get away with that. But then the idea that was happening, I'm sure, you know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But that goes right back to you talking about great characters. That's not Snake's priority right now. He has to get the president, get out of there.
I do. Okay, then when we're talking about that scene, you can't talk about the scene without mentioning Buck Flowers, who's a guy who he has the armband. Yeah. He's like, I knew I'd be president when I found this. And he sings "Hail to the Chief." Not drunk. I love that guy. He was in The Fog. He was in They Live. He was in Back to the Future as the bum. So
he was Fred. It was Fred. Yeah, I remember that.
He kind of has this. He had this. But I think They Live, he actually plays not a bum. He actually has lines and stuff. The Fog, he's in a little bit. But yeah, the guy with the boots, nice boots, Chief. And then these guys come out of the shadows and Snake beats him up. And he's like, I'm walking, Chief, I'm walking. I've stolen that line. I love that line. I'm walking, Chief, I'm walking. I just love that. Throwaway. So there are these little Carpenter moments that stick. But yeah, I love that kind of basement scene.
Killer. And after he finds the wristband, he's convinced the president's dead. So he tells Hawk, like, look, he's gone. I can't find anything. And Hawk's like, if you don't come out of there with the president,
I'll burn you off the wall. That's awesome. And that's you're going through this. And that's where he sits down. The idea he takes a beat. He's like, well, I don't know what the fuck to do. Yeah. He just kind of sits in the ruins and like, what am I going to do? And then the crazies come out and kind of the plot takes him that way.
Yes. Goes to Chock full of nuts, meets that girl.
Oh, another kind of cool trivia, the MAC-10 machine gun that he's carrying in that. Rodriguez copied that and put it in El Mariachi. So the El Mariachi gun is the same gun from Escape from New York.
That's awesome.
And sound effects and all that were, but it's one of those where I think it's a modified MAC-10, I think, with a silencer. Yeah. But again, it has a kind of a futuristic vibe, but that gun does pop up in El Mariachi, yeah. Which so Rodriguez made for $7,000. So, you know, his first movie. So clearly he nod back to Carpenter.
So cool. And I love the scene with the girl in Chock full of nuts because she asks for a smoke and he gives her a pack of cigarettes and she's like, wow, these are real. You just got here.
Put your hand over it. Yeah, the light because the crazies. But even that, the idea that people living in the sewers and the subways, you know, it's kind of what there was an 80s film called Chud.
Yeah.
Why I remember the title more than the movie, but the idea of these underground dweller kind of things, that vibe I like, that the crazies come out for food once a month or something and they head back down, and that Mongoloid's heading in the sewers. Again, world building for nothing. They just had a couple extras running in the shadows, but take that and then you let your mind play with, wow, what is this whole world underground that we never see that's going on? And they drag this lady down to her death, and it's just kind of, you know. But I love it that they paints that entire world with just a few throwaway extras and some fog smoke and a manhole cover. That's it.
It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Snake meets Cabby, who gives him a ride away from the crazies. Cabby tells him, oh yeah, if you want to know where the Duke is, he'll take you to Brain. He'll know everything.
Well, and then Cabby's like, you know, Eddie, wait till I tell Eddie Snake Plissken in my cab. The idea plays up that, like, you know, that everybody knows who this guy is. Yeah. Can't believe he's a modern celebrity, but you have no idea why. So I guess he's like a Robin Hood kind of guy, or is just, they play with the idea that he's an ex-war hero, World War III war hero, that we went to war with the Soviet Union, this kind of stuff.
So where he lost the eye.
Right.
And that's all just background info you kind of have to look up for yourself. None of that's in the movie.
And I'm sure that was just, again, fan base. I don't think that was in the script.
No.
They just, you know, people have taken that and branched off to kind of play in that world, and this is the world that, you know, yeah, I love that.
So cool. So Cabby takes Snake to Brain, and Snake recognizes Brain as Harold Hellman, an old partner of his, and he has a confrontation with him. That's a great scene. Great scene.
That's a little bit where you can see, really, come on, he's actually going to find, you know, that's his old friend. But you buy it. I love Harry Dean Stanton as an actor. I mean, the man, that was one where when he died, it was like, but that guy had been in so many movies going, geez, I don't know how far back you go. Kelly's Heroes, early role, I mean, but lot of movies, just iconic guy, and plays that part. They play off of each other, really. Him, Adrian Barbeau, you know, I'll spray his brains all over the Matt Baby. Tell me where's the president? That kind of, just the whole, when I like good actors playing off of each other, and you know, with solid dialogue, and you can see they're having fun with it.
Kind of competing, it's just fun.
No small parts, just small actors.
Right, and how everybody, you know, there was the four actors kind of working together to make that scene pop, and it does. It really works.
Yes, it does. So cool. And Brain tells Snake that the Duke is planning to lead an escape across the Queensboro Bridge using the president as a shield, and he's going to use this landmine map that Brain has drawn up that ends up being completely useless.
That's a cool scene where it's like a train depot or something where they're holding the president. So again, taking what sets they had and then building around it. Okay, we'll make this. I'm sure they just came across it and were like, okay, let's use this because it's a cool location, a cool looking place. That's where they go down Broadway. Awesome scene. Why, what the hell's wrong with Broadway? And then you see the heads on the spikes. And there's a whole nother group of weirdos that control Broadway for some reason. So you get this idea that Manhattan's been diced up into so it has a prisoner vibe to it. But they're all just unseen extras. And that's what I like about it. But it's such huge world building from just driving, whole idea of the Duke of New York's car has chandeliers on the front. I love that. That's such a throwaway, set dressing, but you remember it. There's chandeliers shaking as his car's driving. That's just so cool.
So neat, man. And Brain takes Snake to the train depot to get the president, and Snake goes in there like a goddamn ninja and just takes out one of the guys. The president's staring at him, and the other guy gets Snake in the leg with a crossbow, which is crazy. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Snake gets the guy and tells the president, I'm here, move fast. And the president's like, goddamn right, I'll move fast. He's just so scared.
Well, and you got Donald Pleasance gives it away because he's looking at Snake coming in, he's all freaking out. So it kind of you got the president kind of screwing it up. Yeah. And that's how Snake gets shot, yeah.
And Snake gets captured, forced to fight in a death match against Slag, that big wrestler dude. That's crazy. We talked a bit about that. Brain and Maggie, they end up killing Romero and saving the president, and that's a crazy scene.
Yeah, again, and those were scenes where the idea of a staged fight in what I guess is supposed to be Madison Square Garden. I mean, it is like a small gym, but that's where you're taking it. The idea they've set that up there. Also, I guess it was probably, I don't know if the Road Warrior had come out already or not, but the dressing, the idea of the cast and costumes for the background guys, all the prisoners in New York, is a little it's a weird combo of scarves and bandana. It's a Western vibe, and it has this Mad Max-ish feel to it. It's
really just whatever they could find, because there's nothing.
I'm sure the costume designers were just put that. One guy was wearing sunglasses with one lens missing, and Asian guy who's the timekeeper or something has a bandana on, but things like that you remember. But I'm sure that was probably with just a big. They didn't. I can't imagine they had a giant costume budget, so it was just let's throw this on. But it does have a Mad Max vibe to it. All the prisoners and what they're wearing.
Big time. It's so weird when they go to get the president. Romero has the president in a blonde wig.
Yeah, I love that. Again, that's making that character his own.
You just wonder what was going on in there.
And they don't play with this. Is he transgender? Is he gay? They kind of. I bet none of that was in the script. I got to give all that to either Carpenter or Frank Doubleday. Just making that character something that you remember. I mean, it's very memorable. Traded the tape with Cabby. He's a distinct character that was probably not on the page. I go back to that I bet that's strictly actor just taking something and really running with it.
I love that when you see Romero in Cabby's hat, my first thought is, he killed Cabby and took that hat. You never think he actually made good on the trade.
Yeah, I traded him for it.
And I love that comes up later, and it's very important. Mm-hmm. Such a throwaway line, because I think it had been a while since I saw the movie, and I was watching it, I thought Romero killed his ass. So great. And they go back to the World Trade Center to escape in the glider, but one of those crazy dudes, they've been destroying it. They throw it off the roof. And
goddamn Redskins. And that's another side gang that you'd imagine that that's their, and they go up and just how'd they discover this, or are they living in the World Trade Center, or this group that had heard him come down and they went up and saw this glider hanging there. Why didn't they steal it? Yeah. But that's a cool visual of the glider kind of falling.
I love that they don't try to steal it. They immediately just go straight to destroy
trash it. Yeah,
there is no escape. Why would you bother? This is life now.
Well, and the whole idea that the prisoners have been convinced that the Duke of New York's they're gonna all leave. He's gonna evacuate Manhattan Island with the president out in front, and he's like, yeah, guys don't something. I know something you and the Duke don't know kind of vibe. If we don't get this, president can be worth a whole hell of a lot. I love that whole concept. Just brilliant lines.
So cool. So they're like, what the hell do we do now? They go back to the street. They meet Cabby. He offers to take him across the bridge. And
great. There's a nod. Have to give a nod to Carpenter's score during that chase. The idea of them. It's it just that's over and over and over again, and with all the action going on, it just amps up all that whole scene. And that's all they're doing is just driving. It's this group's in a cab, and then the Duke of New York's doing his eye twitch in his giant Cadillac with the chandeliers on it. But it's that just amps it up. Really heavy. Yeah, really gets you.
So cool. And that's when we realize Romero bartered with Cabby for the tape, and the president demands the tape. Snake's like, not so goddamn fast. I'm taking this tape.
I don't know if that was a script choice. Having American Bandstand, I thought was great. That's like the perfect song. It comes in at the end, but if you can think like what song they could have used, that was just it's just a great choice.
Yeah, it's a perfect fuck you song.
Yeah, it really is. I don't hear that now and don't think of Escape from New York. Like it's just so it kind of transcended the song in a way of it.
So cool. The Duke is pissed. He pursues them on the bridge in his caddy, and they're setting off mines as he tries to catch up. And Brain starts guiding Cabby through the minefield, and I love that they hit a mine almost immediately.
Well, that's it. They hit a mine, but also I remember if you rewatch it enough, you realize the map that Cabby has is wrong. They would have blown up anyway because he's trying to get him. This is the way the map goes, and he triggers a mine. So if they actually would have followed him, they all would have blown up.
Yeah.
The idea that they're just running away, and he's like, "You're going the wrong way," and then he goes the way the map goes, and it kills him. So the map was wrong.
Yeah, so crazy. And they continue on foot. Brain gets killed by a mine, and Maggie. They have this emotional moment where Maggie's like, "I'm not leaving him," and she takes a gun at the Duke's car.
Great sound design with the gunshots on that.
Yeah,
because that was again little things like that a lot of movies don't take the time to. But I think of Aliens is like that too with the gun fire.
Yeah.
It's a distinct gunshot.
Indiana Jones has that too.
Yeah, where they whoever was the sound designer on that took the time to like, hey, this is important.
Yeah. And
when she's just standing there with a pistol firing, I can hear that, but it doesn't sound like it's like a muffled kind of shot. But it was great sound design on that.
Crazy. She gets run down by the Duke. Snake and the president reach the wall. The guards raise up the president first. Duke starts opening fire, killing the guards, and they stop the cable for Snake.
Awesome cuts, quick cuts. The way they do that. Station 17. Why I know that just shows like that's where they go. So it's, but yeah, brilliant. And just brilliant tense scene.
President guns down the Duke with an assault rifle, screaming, "You're a number one!"
That's awesome.
So great, so satisfying.
Yeah, savage.
Like he was the right person to take down the Duke.
And honestly, it's one of those where, they could have cast anybody again. I think he wanted to bring back Donald Pleasance in a non-Loomis role, which was cool. And I think once why me as the president? But it's kind of neat that in Carpenter's world, Donald Pleasance would be the president. It's like, yeah, I buy it. But it's an awesome, he probably I bet he did the part for that moment. I bet he was like, all right, do anything you want, put a wig on me, kick me around, I don't care. I just am looking forward to shooting the gun and yelling at Isaac Hayes on the bridge. I bet he loved that because it's just you could see he just chews the scenery when he's doing that scene.
So cool. Snake gets lifted to safety, and the micro explosives are neutralized after he gives the tape to Hawk with 3 seconds to spare. So goddamn tense.
I don't know if medically that would work. If you're going to be like, would that work? But I love it. The idea of it slowly dissolving.
Yeah.
And, want to connect it to a time clock. All right, I'll buy it. But it is one of those really.
It's one of those future tech moments.
But I love it. Yeah. You've totally, and just putting this, all right, we're done. Kind of that takes care of it. But it works with it. It just amps the tension up, and just a couple seconds left. Yeah.
And then immediately the president starts getting a shave and taken care of, putting a suit. Because he's got to give a speech to the leaders at the summit, and he thanks Snake for his service and says, anything you want, name it. And Snake just wants to know what he feels about Brain and Maggie and Cabby giving their lives. And he's like, oh yeah, well, they were great. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Watch Tom Atkins in that scene. He's in the background. He has no lines, but he really is because even Kurt Russell's kind of just want to see how you feel about that. Just kind of still playing it tough, but also hey, a lot of people did die to get you here.
Yeah.
And Pleasance just kind of dismisses it. But it's Tom Atkins who, like, he walks away, and Tom Atkins watches Snake Plissken walking away, and you kind of see the guys who were the cops are kind of on Snake's side. Like, it's just a complete little throwaway, but I like what Tom Atkins does. I remember that. It's memorable for me, what he does in that scene.
That's great. And it's true. After all this, the president's a piece of shit. He doesn't who cares about these lives?
But that's what the capper is, that he goes on camera, and then, I can't be there for this historical summit, but this tape means, and then plays it in its American Bandstand. And that's one of the best FU endings I can think of.
Yes.
And you just see Snake walking away, ripping the
tape
apart.
up.
Smoking the cigarette.
Yeah. Well, and then the Lee Van Cleef, you should work with me. And he's like, call me
Pliskin.
Call me the name's Pliskin.
Yeah.
So that's what's awesome. Yeah, the name's Pliskin. That's awesome. He's like, I can't remember the line, but he's like, I'll offer you a job. I got a job for you.
We'll make a hell of a team.
Right. Yeah. And he's kind of very Western vibe, and he's like, name's Pliskin, and walks away. And then
it's wonderful.
Then the Carpenter score. Even you think of sci-fi movies, the opening and closing credits. All it is white letters on a black screen. That's it.
Yeah. Yep.
And his score, and that's it. And it just immediately kills you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally gets you. And it's probably, you look at, I don't know, think of movies where they go balls to the wall on opening credits, and this is just nothing. Very simple.
Yeah.
And it still stands out.
It's actual credits.
You're immediately just like, all right, I'm in. His music can do that. It's amazing.
There's trying to think. If you think of the credits, I mean, it's awesome. You've got James Cameron is Jim Cameron in the credits.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Jim Cameron.
When I was watching last night, I was like, oh shit.
John Deal is an actor who I remember from Miami Vice and stuff. He was one of these guys, but he's listed as punk. So I don't know if he was just like a background guy or something. He was really young, but he's an actor that I don't know why I think of Miami Vice when I think of him, but that's a guy that I remember. Dick Warlock is one of his stunt coordinators, and
Dick Warlock. We talked
in
about him a bit in Halloween. I love his name.
He was the Carpenter's stunt guy, lead stunt guy in this one. Just stellar.
It's a gem.
It is a gem.
Yeah, it's a true gem.
Fantastic. It's got an IMDb score of 7.2.
That's too low.
Rotten Tomatoes score of 85%. Certified fresh.
Yeah.
And personally, I give this film a 9 out of 10. I think it's fucking great.
It is. I have friends whose like their favorite movie is Lawrence of Arabia or The Godfather and all this. But it's funny how this is like what's your favorite movie? I tend to kind of go back to this one. Coen Brothers, Leone. I mean, there's a group of filmmakers whose work I can kind of put on at any time and just have in the background. And Carpenter is one of them. And this is I probably go back to this film of his more than any of the other ones. I'll watch Halloween around Halloween time, and The Thing is always a great, to throw on. But Escape from New York, I'll find if I'm just in a good mood or something. I'll put it on.
It's one of those movies. Mm-hmm. It's short and sweet. It's only an hour and a half long, but it's so perfect.
It's a gut punch. Yeah.
It's a great. Yeah, unbelievable. Great.
It's
watch.
worth if you're a fan of this, it's worth printing out the script just to read, just to see it, how really lean it is. I think that I can't go back to that enough. How there's no meat. The meat on the bone is real. It's just it's a pared down piece of material. So for writers out there who put a lot of flowery language in paragraphs and stuff, it really shows a lot of white on the page. It moves fast. I mean, that's really, if you're going to write an action script, that's how you really want to write it. You want to make sure that it's crisp, clean, and moves forward.
Good tempo, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'd love if, track that script down, Escape from Earth. If there's got to be a way to get a hold of it, I'd love to get a hold of it. It's still one of those things I'm out looking for, because I just want to know how the story ends.
Yeah. Just curiosity.
Story. Yeah. I'd love to see it. Why it's not an animated film by now with Kurt Russell doing the voiceovers beyond me, man. It should be.
Especially with all these streaming services, you would think that Netflix...
Somebody would jump on that.
Yeah.
These days, I feel like with the success of Halloween, I think we are going to get maybe a bit of Carpenter resurgence soon, and I hope Escape from New York gets put into that.
The next, if you think about the remake list, the next one on the docket should be Big Trouble in Little China, which is going to bomb. But that's horrible. But it probably will, because there's no way it's Jack Burton. It just can't. And they were even saying it's not. We're not going to remake it. It's going to be a continuation of the story. And I guess they have a comic book called Old Man Jack, which is doing okay. That apparently looks at Jack Burton as a so Kurt Russell could play him now as like a guy.
Yeah, they're going to do a continuation. Just do it.
That's the way to do it.
That'd be pretty interesting.
Yeah. I could see you doing that. And I think Snake Plissken shows up in the Old Man Jack books, or Old Man Burton books. So I think that's kind of funny.
I think there's an audience for that too.
Especially with, Kurt Russell's proven he can still draw a box office. He's playing the bad guy in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
Yeah.
So he's still a guy, like still working, still a badass. He could play Snake today.
I'll bet it's a question he gets asked. And like, are you ever going to get a chance? And I'm sure it's
legitimately asked.
Yeah. Will the studio ever do it? I don't know. I do think, Escape. They consider Escape from LA a bomb. I think they consider Escape from New York a cult classic. It's kind of where it's dismissed. A B movie. Let's not pretend like it's anything more than that. It's like, well, hell, I like B movies. That's why I like it. I hold it up there. I think it's a classic B movie. So
that's why we started this whole podcast, because we love B movies.
Yeah, it's awesome. So I find it's funny what the studios kind of look at as success or failure or not, and I don't know. But yeah, to me that's one that's just screaming for not a remake or a redo, but I'd love to know where that story goes. And they kind of left it where they should so wrap it up. I think it would be he earned it, deserves it, kind of thing. It would be smart to do.
Maybe in 2021, because it'll be exactly 40 years.
Maybe.
Wow,
it's amazing, right?
That just makes me feel old. It's that old already. But Jesus.
Well, we'll see. I think that about wraps it up for Escape from New York. This has been a lot of fun.
This was fun, guys.
Thanks
I really
for
enjoyed
joining
it.
us.
It's a solid 9 out of 10 for me as well. I enjoy it so much.
I don't know what I'd rate it as, but I'll watch it again. So, I watched it last night, and it's on the shelf, so I'm sure I'll watch it again.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Never goes away, never fades.
Exactly.
Well, we hope you enjoyed listening to this one. Join us for Gremlins next week, and keep on trucking. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Thanks, guys.